Darrh Bullock. Dr. Bullock was raised on his family's beef cattle and watermelon farm in Williston, Florida. He earned a Bachelor of Science in Animal and Dairy Sciences and a Master's in Animal Breeding and Genetics from Auburn University. He earned a PhD in beef cattle, PhD in beef cattle breeding and genetics from the University of Georgia. Dr. Bullock has been on faculty at University of Kentucky since 1992 and holds the rank of Extension Professor, specializing in beef cattle genetics. Dr. Bullock is involved in numerous national and international groups, including the EP team, the NBCEC Programming Committee, and has served as a past board member and committee chair for the Beef Improvement Federation. I would like to welcome Dr. Darrh Bullock.
Thank you. Ms. Secretary? All right, it is a pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk, and I guess I'm the diversity speaker. I have hair, right? at least so far. I was asked to give a talk. We didn't here in the Fescue Belt. Basically, we're talking about it. I know there's a lot more of the Fescue Belt, Kentucky and Tennessee. We've been fortunate to have some cost share dollars that have gone into a genetic improvement program that each of the states have done independently. And so I'm going to share a little bit of that information with you. Now, I think when I was asked to give this, it was probably just to give you guys probably some overview of these programs and kind of some data and statistics about it. But I thought that would be pretty boring. So I put us under a little pressure and wanted to see if we could detect whether or not these programs have actually done any good. Are we moving the needle at all? So that's what we've attempted to do with this, and we'll see how that comes out. Want to think about, when we talk about, you guys have come here to Tennessee and we appreciate it. When we typically think about beef cattle in the country and we see these rankings, you guys have seen them all the time. You look at the big seven and in terms of cattle numbers, right? Nobody east of the Mississippi. Okay. And so when we look at the second seven, now we start coming in there pretty good. We show up all right now. Kentucky seventh with just over 900,000 head of cattle. Tennessee is in there at 13, just under 900,000 head of cattle. And these are beef cows, these numbers. And so that is one way to look at it, and that's the way you always see it, right? I don't think that's very fair. If you look at a map, and you look at the size of the states, everything's bigger out there, right? And so let's look at it from a density standpoint. We look at it, how many cows do we have per square mile? Things shift up a little bit, right? Now we see some differences. Now, and hey, there's three of them that are in color up there, and I know Arkansas is on the other side of the river. But when you think about the southeast, I think that Arkansas typically gets grouped in with the rest of us. But the top seven, now we have three states from a cattle density. And to think of it this way, if you have somebody driving across your state, are they seeing cattle or not? And these are the states where we really do. Now, when we look at the second group, we see some of the same players again, but still a lot of cattle on this side of the Mississippi when we look at it from a density standpoint. And hey, we can't Knoxville and not talk about support, right? Okay. And so you can see that 8 of the 14 are SEC states, right? For those of you that aren't on that list, don't worry. Next year you will probably be in the SEC. Because in the SEC, it just means more, obviously. All right. So a few years back, in 92 is when I came to Kentucky. When I came to Kentucky, cash receipts for tobacco made up 25% of the ag commodities. That's a bunch, right? In Tennessee, I looked it up, it was about 10%, a little more than 10%. So tobacco meant a lot to these states, okay? And it was absolutely king. When I came to Kentucky, Management during tobacco season of the cattle operation was completely non-existent. Nobody cared what was happening to the cattle unless they got in the tobacco patch, right? That was about the only time the cattle got any kind of attention. Well, things don't always stay the same, okay? And so tobacco was king until it was not any longer. And we had something called the Tobacco Master Settlement. You guys recall, and in a lot of states, you probably don't, because once it happened, that money went into your legislature's general budget and you never saw or heard of it again. And that's the reality. But what it is it's a tax, or it's money that goes back into the states, and this was to keep every individual from suing all the big tobacco. Okay, the settlement was, it's so we'll get that money back into the states, but individuals can't now sue the tobacco company. And it's a big deal. In Kentucky, that figure to date, since 1998, $2.7 billion. Last year, we got 105 million coming back into the state. Tennessee did even a little bit better over time, almost 4 billion, and last year, almost 1.5 million, $100.5 million dollars back in. And I can tell you that, and I'm going to brag on politicians for just a little bit, and it'll be the last time I do it, but they did it right. I think in our states, they put a big chunk of this money back into agriculture. In Kentucky, that's 50% of that money that comes back in and goes back into agricultural programs, okay? And so that's pretty significant. Don't think that agriculture is succeeding, though, off of the backs of the health of our citizens, because if you look at the statistics of what's happened since that tobacco settlement, we've reduced consumption of cigarettes by about 50% nationwide. And particularly the youth consumption is greatly reduced over that time. So in Kentucky, how we spent that money is like I said, it's going back into agriculture. But when that money, when it was first, the tobacco settlement first came about, they had it came in waves. And initially, they paid out tobacco farmers. Okay, so the farmers got a one-time buyout check based on their tobacco allotment. All right, so that happened, and once that happened, you know, there was no more money that was going to go directly to a farmer for the fact that they produced tobacco. But they also had other pots of money that went into what we call the county or the statewide program, and a big chunk of it goes into that. And there's a board that oversees that money, and it is basically to help initially with that transition from tobacco to other commodities. And I mean, we had some weird stuff. I mean, we had worm farming. That's where the vineyards came in big time. A lot of the wine production in the state and things like that. So there was a lot of all that. And actually, initially, it sort of beef out because we were old school, you know, and so you wanted fresh new programs. But I think over time, they kind of realized that beef's pretty important. So we started getting, I would say, our fair share of that money as well in the state program. And then there's also the county funding that goes into these incentive programs. Now, it does not just go to former tobacco farmers. It goes to any agricultural product or producers in the county. So when this whole thing started, I had several counties to contact me and say they wanted to start up a full cost share program. And each of them had a little different idea how they wanted that thing to work out. And we have 120 counties in Kentucky. And if every one of those counties had a different factor or have a different cost share program, it would be pretty crazy, right? And so fortunately, we noticed early on, we needed to have a state model that we put together, and that any county that wanted to participate in that had to use those state guidelines. And so we were fortunate to get that done initially before all the confusion happened. So how we decided to do it was based on a category approach. And this is basically independent polling levels. What we did was we set standards, EPD standards, that folks had to look at. Okay, and this was based on, like I say, EPDs. I also worked with Mark and the data that they have on the breed comparison aspects to kind of give us some, we put breeds into categories, and I know people hate when you do that, but that's really what we had to do, and we tried to do it as much on science as we could. And we also, I talked to every breed association, the genetics person at each breed association to make sure that we were kind of getting it right. We came to some pretty good consensus, and it was amazing when you talk to those folks individually, we were able to do that. You put them all in the same room together, guarantee it would never happen. Okay. We also wanted to look at some other things, like breeding soundness exams, so we promote all of these things as well. Okay. So when we initially set up the program, we had 3 categories: heifer acceptable, and that was based on very strong calving needs. So they had a very strong calving needs requirement and a minimal growth requirement. We just wanted, and we targeted that, told people, this is if you're going to breed a high number of heifers for this bull. We also had what we call a balanced trait category. And with our balanced trait category, we had a moderate calving needs requirement. Our growth and milk, we had both lower and upper limits. Okay, so we didn't just turn it loose. We said we want this to truly be balanced trait. We don't want you shooting for the maxes, particularly on the growth and milk side of things. As well. And then we had what we call terminal, and at that time, remember, this is all pre-indexes. And so our terminal was based on a very light calving needs requirement, but a very strong growth requirement. And I did point out that the balanced trait, when we did start getting indexes, we implemented that as an option for producers to use those indexes now in the terminal type index. So in 2003, from feedback from producers, they asked us to implement what we call a low maintenance category and a high productivity category. And we also entered the carcass merit. We started getting carcass EPDs at that time. And so we implemented a carcass merit one as well. And that one, I'll tell you, and we also moved over, once we had good indexes for carcass merit, we moved that over to indexes as well. And then starting here a few years ago, we made genomics a requirement. So now in the program, every bull that qualifies has to have a genomically enhanced EPD. Tennessee, a similar kind of approach. Theirs started a little bit later, 2005. Theirs is also set up kind of the same way. It wasn't exact. Dr. Kirkpatrick is the one that put that, first implemented their program. Was similar to ours, but chose a few different paths. We'll go over some of that back there. The categories that they started with and still have are calving needs maternal. Once again, you can see the traits that they focused on. And again, they were actually ahead of us in terms of implementing indexes as a possibility for people to choose those bulls as well. They also have a balanced trait maternal, but they don't count the top end on theirs. That's one of the differences. And then also they lump together their terminal into an end product terminal type of bull. And then they also were a little bit sooner on the genomics thing. They implemented their genomics program and they implemented it as an added incentive. And then this year, Ryan tells me that it will go in as a requirement just as ours. All right. So I just want to go through some of the similarities of the two programs. Again, we hoped or we attempted to base it on science and technology. We wanted to push the industry forward. When you have some dollars, people tend to pay attention to get a little bit more. Okay, and so they all were based on breed association EPDs. They couldn't just go in and get a pedigree estimate or something like that. The EPD had to actually come from the breed association. We utilized the Mark data, and I just want to put a plug in for Mark. This is another one, folks. That place is essential to us. It's the only place where we can really do some true genetics experiment type work. And the fact that we have these breed comparison things, it drives a lot of the engines out there. And so please, we need to keep that place around, keep it strong, keep it functioning. And we owe, and the other aspect is we implemented genomics as soon as that technology came along and was good and mature. We encourage other sound practices. I'm glad that Jared mentioned crossbreeding. I'm going to mention too in our educational programs. This is a huge focus, is to try and get them to implement all best management practices. And that brings us to that educational component. That is a big part of it. And when we talk about cause and effect, I can tell you when I show you this data about some of the moving the needle a little bit, how much of it is due to the incentive program and how much of it is due to this educational part, because the educational part is huge. Well, we're able to provide dollars for us to go out and actually educate commercial cattlemen on the best way to buy bulls, as well as other management practices, is a huge aspect of it. Like I said, some of the differences in the program, we're not going to get caught up into that. But just some of the ways that we have decided to handle those requirements each year. Tennessee has been more proactive in terms of modifying them and adjusting them each year, whereas ours is a more stable approach. We kind of set the guidelines, and unless something happened or changed in a breed's NCE, we kept them pretty constant over time. And like I say, different bull categories. All right. So this is the number of bulls that have been impacted or sold through the program. And I'm going to admit our data in Kentucky particularly is not very good in terms of what we've kept up. We did a good job early, and for some reason, I don't know if we had some changes in management in the office or what, but things just disappeared for a while, and we're getting back on track now to start getting good data again. But initially, first year we did it, we sold over 4,000 bulls in the program. And I didn't put them on the chart because it skewed it too much. But then after that time period, you can see that we were selling at the 1,400 around range each year, and then it's dropped off pretty much now. We have about 400 bulls a year go through the program. Tennessee selling a few more bulls than we are. These are the prices. You guys on the other side of the river, once again, don't laugh at these prices. These are real prices. We're not missing a zero. And these are the prices that our producers complain about having to pay. Okay. And so fortunately, it has been on the upward swing. You can see that prices didn't change for a long time in Kentucky in terms of that's pretty neat. That work for you guys? Most of it? Yes. Wow, that's good. All right. And so then it really started taking off. And I know we haven't caught up with you guys, we never will, but at least we're seeing a little bit better prices. And if I were to bet, I would say that in Kentucky, we're still a little bit below Tennessee in terms of where our cars would end up if we had a good day. So I thought, let's see how much impact we're actually having on the number of bulls there. So now this is cowboy math, and I'm sure that there's tons of it. They're going to be killed. You're going to be able to tell me what I did wrong with this, but this is what I did in it. In Kentucky, I figure we have that just over 900,000 head of cows. So let's say, and I know this number is way too big. Let's say that we had 30 head per bull unit, right? And that's fair, except that we have a lot of 15 head cow herds, okay? And so I know that this is probably a little bit on the conservative side. Let's say these folks use that bull for 4 years, and you might think that's funny, but that really happens as well, or longer. He's still able to walk around out there. If that's the case, then that's about 7,600 bulls a year that get sold, okay? Of those bulls we sold, over the length of the period, that's about 12%. And once again, very, very conservative. I'm going to say it's probably realistically much lower than that. Is actually impacted by this program. So if I'm able to show you any differences or changes Think about this, the ones that are actually impacted by the program is tiny. And over the recent years, it's only about 5%. Went through the same cowboy logic for Tennessee, and they're hitting about 12% as well. Okay, and so that's the percentage of the bulls that actually, that get sold that may be going into the program. So some of the observed changes are what we think or expect: increased data submission. And I really think that this is real, that we have that, and we're going to look and see if we can show it or not. Increased use of genomics, changes in genetic trends. If we're truly making an impact, then we should be able to see that. For the commercial guy, once again, a lot of this I think comes through our educational programs, but certainly a greatly improved understanding and use of EPDs. And just general management practices in general, better understanding of crossbreeding and hopefully better utilization of crossbreeding as well. And then certainly an improved understanding of genomics. We've really hit this very hard on the educational side, and now we're making the requirement of this program. It gets people's attention, I can promise you. So what does the data say? And I want to thank the American Angus Association. We decided to look into their data set. They were very agreeable to help us out with this. That's the breed that we sell the most of in our state and in Tennessee as well. And so we thought that, and we just didn't have time to do every breed. So we got with Angus, and they helped us out greatly, and we appreciate it. We wanted to look at registrations and data submitted to see if we had any kind of impact there. We wanted to look at genetic trends, index trends, and also genomic submissions to see if we are moving the needle. Okay, so let's get into this. Here's the first one, and this is just looking at registration. There's actually data submission based on registration. How good are the cattle that are being registered? Who is submitting the data? And let's look at that line. That's when the program started in Kentucky. Okay, so look at that little greenish color line. And I know that these things are small. The top one up there for the birth weight, that's the national average. Okay, that's national average for birth weight. So you can see both in general that Tennessee and Kentucky are well below that. But when the program started, in terms of data submission, what's happened there? I think it's pretty obvious that there's a pretty big jump just initially in terms of the percentage of folks that were sending in data on birth weight. For Indian weight, we saw the exact same thing. We had a big jump in the Kentucky submissions of data, because here's the deal: if you had to have EPDs on your bulls to be able to sell them into the program, you had to submit some data. Okay, and so we saw that initial bump. Now, what concerns me is yes, over time, we sort of maintain that, particularly for birth weight. On the weaning weight side, here about 10 years ago, we started to see that tapering off. It's tapering off nationally, but we're even tapering off at a faster rate. Not sure what's going on there. I'm going to just throw this one out, but it's probably, I hope that I'm wrong on this. I hope that we're not seeing a reduction in the number of phenotypes being turned in, because everybody's saying we got genomics now, we don't need phenotypes. That's a lie. We need phenotypes more than ever. So if that's the thought, mindset, we got to get it changed, we got to get it changed quick. Okay? Tennessee, I think some of the same. It didn't have that obvious jump like we had in Kentucky, but I think it still had some impact on the number of registrations that were going in as well. So let's look at some things like genetic trends. What's happening with cavities? Okay, once again, show you where the line will start a bit. Now, cavities, we were well ahead of we were slightly ahead of national average to start with. And over the course of this program, though, we've seen significant separation from the national average in terms of genetic trend for cavities. And I can tell you in Kentucky, when you ask producers what they select for, it's cavities and docility. Okay, so that's not surprising to me at all. We also see the same thing for Tennessee. They've kind of maintained right there on that 10 of each, right with the national average the whole way through. Now you see that red squiggly line up there? Troy was able to get registration numbers on their bulls for those years. And so we looked at actually where the trend was within the program, within the Tennessee program. And you can see that they are really pushing the bar up, even though it's impacting a very small percent of the bulls sold. Those seed stock producers that are providing those bulls have other bulls for sale too, right? And so that's what I think is kind of moving that bar. So looking at a trait like weaning weight, once again, for Kentucky, we were below national average at the onset of the program, and we over time have now slowly caught up with national average. Tennessee was right on national average at the onset of their program, and you can see they've had separation up above. Once again, you wouldn't expect to see us make as much of a move because of the fact, like I told you, we have a cap, particularly on balanced trade, which is our most common category of balls. We have an upward cap on that, so now it is pretty high, but it is at least there. Again, the take bulls, that line probably helping to push that line up. Looking at a trait like milk, same thing. Now we both states have more milk than the national average. Should we? We can probably handle it better. Remember, this goes back to that density thing, that the quantity and quality of the grass that we're able to produce. So that doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't greatly concern me either. You can see that milk we had the huge increase. It looked like it leveled off for a while. We're starting to shoot upwards again. I'm curious to see what Dr. Lawman has to say about that here in a little bit. Looking at some things like a mature weight, because that was our reason for capping on the balanced trade. That was our reason for capping. We didn't want to get mature weight out of skew. And you can see that for the Tennessee, the Kentucky program, we have been right on national average for mature weight. So we've improved our weaning weights, but we're still staying right on course with the mature weight at least. Although we're still close, that line is way too steep nationwide. Tennessee has more growth in their cattle, and it's showing up on the mature weight side of things as well. So here's starting to move along a little bit. So this is really what I wanted to get to. We haven't been using indexes for very long. But did it affect the indexes using these independent polling levels? Were we actually able to affect the indexes? And I'm going to say yes. For $W, you can see that, and I know it gets really squiggly out here, but it looks like that early on we were right at breed average, something like $W, and both Tennessee and Kentucky have moved above national average for that one. And the one that's really more important, and this goes back, it was talked about a little bit last night, and I got it. Dr. Decker went on his rant. I get to go on my rant, but I don't have time to do my rant. And that is we need indexes for the Southeast. Not all of you breeds are giving us that. And $M is a good example. This is a good index for us here in the Southeast. And you can see that we have made significant improvements to our $M over the course of this program. Cause and effect, I can't tell you, but I am happy to see that we're at least moving the bar through a combination probably of these incentive programs and the education program. Last thing, I gotta be quick, genomics, were we able to do anything there? They started in 2016 in Tennessee. We started just a few years ago in Kentucky. It is mandatory for us, so we were able to see any improvements. Once again, they started, this is Tennessee now first because they started first. You can see that they were already above national average when they implemented the program, and they still see about the same improvement over the national average there. Kentucky, we started here, and I hope you can see we were consistently below national average for submissions. And then once we implemented the program, at least we moved slightly above the bar. This is looking at it just a little bit differently. This is of the ones that, of the percentage, of the registrations, that send in their data. And again, we were well in Kentucky, well below national average when we implemented the program, we at least started to catch up. And so I think that was just probably the most clear of anything, that we really did move the bar significantly by the implementation of the program. So in summary, the percentage, remember, percentage of bulls in this program is very small, so the fact that we were able to show any differences, I think, is very significant. Negative impacts that we hear about are the price. People said, well, you implemented this, if you're gonna give them $1,000, the seed stock guys are just gonna charge them $1,000 for the bulls. It didn't work out that way. Anyway, that's you're gonna hear that. Some of the positive impacts, I think the improved understanding of selection from both our seed stock and commercial guys is evident. Certainly improved registrations, and also, at least initially, some improvements in phenotyping. We've got to do a better job of that, and we need to think that through in our program as well. Improved index values over the compared to the national average. Improved usage of genomics technology, and I think that we're just going to see that go up and up over time with this program. The positive economic benefits. Tennessee did a study, their ag econ department did a study, and said for every dollar that went into the TAPE program, and that's not just the cost share, that's all of their programs, center programs, that for every dollar they spend, it returned about $6.50 to the local economy. I think if you look at that improvement that we made in Kentucky, the dollar M, if you look at, if we improved dairy feeder calf by about $7, and we have about 750,000 feeder calves we sell every year, that's about a $5 million impact on income, added income, in fact, came back into the state. And so, folks, I want to thank some people. Troy, he's the man. I really appreciate it. Ryan Betzenberger, he's with the Tennessee Department of Ag, and was great with getting me some data. Our own Sarah Ryan did the thing for us. Also, Kelly, you guys at AGI, I really appreciate your work there. And the big star of this was Marissa, who really did the yeoman's work and getting this data put together for us. We really appreciate Marissa for that. That's all, folks. Sorry, that's just about it.